Hey, before we begin, tell me something. Where are you listening me from right now? Which corner of the world are you in, and what time is it there? I'd love to know who's here with me, so don't be shy, drop it in the comments. They say a mother's love is unconditional, a fixed point in a turning world. But in our house, love was a luxury, and it was reserved for the daughter who could prove she deserved it. My name is Elena, and I was born 7 minutes after my sister Maya. For those 7 minutes, I suppose I was enough, but from the moment we could speak, read, and think, those 7 minutes became a lifetime of distance. I remember the smell of old paper and the hushed silence of our living room when we were 6 years old. We were taking a placement test for a gifted academy. Maya's pencil flew across the page like it was dancing. Mine? Mine felt heavy, like a lead weight. I struggled with the logic puzzles. The numbers seemed to blur and shift. When the results came back, the atmosphere in our home changed forever. Maya was exceptional. I was average. My mother, Catherine, didn't yell. She didn't even look angry. She just looked disappointed. It was a cold, clinical kind of rejection. She began to refer to Maya as her star, her legacy. And me? I was the shadow. I was the girl who needed extra tutoring, the girl who couldn't keep up, the girl who was just there. "It's just biology, Elena," she told me one night, tucking Maya into bed while I stood in the doorway, unnoticed. "Some seeds are meant to bloom, and others are just meant to be the soil. You should be proud to support your sister." That was the theme of my childhood, being the soil. I watched as my mother poured every resource, every ounce of affection, and every penny of our late father's inheritance into Maya's education, her violin lessons, and her elite summer camps. I wore Maya's hand-me-downs. I stayed home while they traveled to academic decathlons. I was the invisible twin. But the breaking point came the day of our high school graduation. Maya was valedictorian, headed for an Ivy League future. I had worked 3 jobs to save up for a community college business program. That evening, I found my mother packing a suitcase. Not for a trip, for a move. She had sold our family home. She told me, with a calm that shattered my soul, that she was moving across the country to be near Maya's university. "And me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Elena, you're a survivor," she said, not even looking up from her silk blouses. "You don't have Maya's potential. Keeping you with us would only hold her back. It's time you found your own way. I've left you $500 on the counter. It's more than enough for someone with your modest goals." She left. No hug, no backward glance, just the sound of the door clicking shut and the deafening silence of an empty house. I was 18, alone, and according to my own mother, worth exactly $500. The first few months were a blur of cold nights and the smell of cheap coffee. I slept on a used mattress in a studio apartment that leaked when it rained. Every bone in my body ached from pulling double shifts at a local diner and cleaning offices at night, but every time I felt like giving up, I saw my mother's face. I heard her voice calling me the soil. I realized then that she was right about one thing. I wasn't like Maya. I didn't have her effortless grace or her photographic memory. I had something Maya never needed to develop: grit. While Maya was attending mixers and studying philosophy on my mother's dime, I was learning the heartbeat of the real world. I watched how the diner owner managed his inventory. I talked to the office managers while I scrubbed their floors, asking them how they handled their logistics. I didn't learn from textbooks. I learned from the dirt. I used that $500 to buy a broken-down delivery van. I started a small courier service, specializing in the things the big companies wouldn't touch: fragile medical samples and late-night legal documents. I was the driver, the dispatcher, and the mechanic. My average brain became a powerhouse of routes, schedules, and client needs. But the emotional weight was heavier than the work. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of 3 p.m, I would look at Maya's social media. I saw photos of her and my mother in Paris, in London, at gala balls. They looked like royalty. I looked at my cracked hands, stained with grease and ink, and I cried. I felt broken. I felt like the universe had made a mistake, giving me a heart that craved love from a woman who only valued IQ scores. Why wasn't I enough? I would whisper to the empty van. But then, a shift happened. I stopped looking at their photos. I blocked their accounts. I realized that as long as I was seeking their validation, I was still the invisible twin. I had to build a world where their opinions didn't exist. My small courier business grew into a logistics firm. I hired my first employee, then 10, then 50. I discovered I had a knack for seeing patterns in chaos, a common sense that no Ivy League degree could teach. I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. I reinvested every cent. I bought warehouses. I pivoted into tech-integrated shipping. 10 years passed. I was no longer the girl in hand-me-downs. I was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. I lived in a home filled with light, far away from the shadows of my childhood. But I never forgot the cold click of that front door. One afternoon, my secretary buzzed my desk. "A woman named Maya is here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's an emergency." My heart hammered against my ribs. I hadn't spoken to them in a decade. I smoothed my suit jacket and told her to let her in. Maya walked in, but she wasn't the star I remembered. She looked exhausted. Her clothes were expensive but wrinkled, and her eyes were rimmed with red. She stared at my office, at the sweeping view of the city, with an expression of pure shock. "Elena?" She whispered, Is this all yours?" "It is," I said, my voice steady. "What do you want, Maya?" The story poured out of her like a flood. It turned out that genius didn't guarantee success. Maya had spent years chasing high-risk investments, fueled by our mother's relentless pressure to be the best. She had lived a life of pretension, spending the inheritance and then some. She had tried to start a luxury brand that crumbled under debt. And my mother? She had put everything she had into Maya's failures. "We're losing the house, Elena," Maya sobbed. "Mom is sick, it's her heart. The medical bills are astronomical. We have nothing left. Mom, she told me I had to find you. She saw an article about your company in the business journal." The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. After a decade of silence, after being discarded like trash, they were back because the soil had grown a forest they wanted to hide in. "She sent you?" I asked. "She's ashamed," Maya admitted, looking at her feet. "She didn't think you'd actually succeed. She thought you'd be struggling." I felt a surge of old anger, a fire I thought I had extinguished years ago. They didn't want me. They wanted my balance sheet. They wanted the average daughter to save the gifted one. "I need to see her," I said. I drove to the small, cramped apartment where they were staying. It smelled of medicinal rub and faded perfume. When I walked into the bedroom, I saw her. My mother looked small. The woman who had loomed like a giant in my childhood was now just a frail shadow in a bed. She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. Not fear for me, but fear of me. She saw the jewelry, the designer coat, the confidence in my posture. "Elena," she rasped. "You came." "I did," I said, sitting in the chair by the bed. I didn't reach for her hand. I couldn't. "Maya told you?" she asked. "We are in a terrible position. My daughter, she was meant for greatness, but the world was cruel to her. She just needs a fresh start. If you could just settle the debts, perhaps buy us a small place in the city." She was still doing it. Even now, facing bankruptcy and illness, she called Maya my daughter, as if I were a stranger. She wasn't asking for my forgiveness, she was asking for a transaction. "You told me I was the soil, Mom," I said quietly. "You told me I didn't have the potential to be anything more than a footstool for Maya's success. I was trying to be realistic." She snapped, a flicker of her old coldness returning. How was I to know you had this hidden drive? It wasn't hidden, I replied. You just didn't value it because it didn't look like yours. You threw me away with $500. You left an 18-year-old girl with nothing because she wasn't smart enough for your love. The silence in the room was heavy. Maya stood in the corner, weeping silently. I will help you, I said. The relief on their faces was instantaneous, but I wasn't finished. I have bought your debts. I now own the deed to your apartment and the notes on your loans. I will pay for your medical care, and I will provide a modest monthly allowance for you both. Oh, thank you, Elena. My mother cried, reaching out. I stood up and stepped back. But there are conditions. You will live in a home I choose. Maya will work in one of my warehouses, an entry-level position. She will learn what it means to earn a living from the ground up. And you, Mother, you will never have a say in my life again. You will receive your checks from my lawyers. I am not your daughter anymore. I am your benefactor. The look of horror on her face was my closure. I had spent my whole life wanting to be seen by her. Now, she was forced to see me every single day, not as the daughter she loved, but as the woman who held her entire world in her hands. I walked out of that apartment and into the sunlight. The weight that had been on my chest since I was 6 years old finally lifted. I realized then that intelligence isn't just about logic puzzles or grades. It's about the wisdom to know your worth when no one else does. Maya and my mother got their fresh start, but it wasn't the life of luxury they expected. They live a quiet, humble life, funded by the average girl they rejected. As for me, I finally stopped being the soil. I realized that even without a mother's son, I could grow toward the light on my own. I am successful, I am strong, and most importantly, I am at peace, because the greatest revenge isn't hurting those who hurt you. It's living a life so beautiful that their absence is the only thing you don't regret. For more stories, please subscribe the channel and press bell icon.